Hey everybody, go to my website, theostomyguy.com. Order my book, Memoirs of a Bagman, The Ostomy Guy Story. There's a button on there that says buy now. It'll take you to Amazon, or you can go straight to amazon.com. Memoirs of a Bagman, The Ostomy Guy Story. Check it out. Hey, thanks for joining me again for another episode of the Ostomy Guy podcast. Today I'm here again with Callea B, the guru of ostomies, I would call her a saint in the world of ostomy caregivers. She probably wouldn't like that title because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. But she really is been a lot of help to me and is a wealth of information in regards to not just ostomy life, but she has a ton of patient experience and can tap into all of that to be able to have a lot of recommendations and different situations that she's pulling from to kind of help solve problems. It's been really cool getting to know her, and she's here again. And today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the acceptance after ostomy surgery and kind of coming out of whether you went into surgery and came out with one and you didn't know it was an emergency and it was a surprise, or whether you planned it and it was going to happen. All of us across the spectrum have different degrees of acceptance in our struggle with that. Some of us don't even get there. But that's what we're going to kind of talk about a little bit. And she's just going to stomp through with me what she would normally stomp through with one of her patients. And we'll kind of talk through a little back and forth with dealing with that. And so, Callea, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I think we're learning together from the patient yet provider role, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
So I think we have a lot to learn still, which is even better. So, but yeah, I think, over the last 4 years since I've had my outpatient ostomy clinic and been dealing with ostomates in the acute care situation, either with seeing them for the first time after initial ostomy surgery or maybe being referred to me from another clinic, I feel like the hardest thing for me is to make sure that they get to where they need to be, even though I have no control over that. And there are several stages of being able to accept any sort of change, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's a new diagnosis, whether it's ostomy surgery. Yeah. And so a lot of that may be a different time frame for each individual. It may be days, it may be weeks, it may be months, it may be never. And one of the first stages that I most commonly see with patients is depression, and how they become rather withdrawn and then definitely can be very angry. And a lot of times those two stages may go together. The common, as Betsy Kubler-Ross would say, to quote her exactly, as far as the stages of grieving: depression, anger, bargaining, depression, anger, bargaining, acceptance. And so it's a matter of how quickly they get there. May not be in anybody's time frame, but definitely need somebody along with them to try to help them adapt to the change and definitely accept the new changes in their life. But I think for me as a provider, it's something that I'm very passionate about, as if patients don't move through those stages, then it also becomes something that can be very detrimental to their quality of life on a day-to-day basis. And, I think in the beginning, as far as denying the fact that you may have an ostomy, I don't know, Austin, if you can speak to that issue in the very beginning. Like I said, that denial and anger may come together at the same time. I don't know if you can speak to that from your experience in the beginning. I know you knew what was coming as well. So
I did, and I didn't. So the denial part, it wasn't initially. So because I was expecting it, I woke up, I knew what I was kind of going to be dealing with. I knew it was going to be a little bit of a struggle. I didn't know what it was going to entail. I just knew it was going to be different, and I was up for anything. And then I got out of the hospital, was home, and I was rehabbing, gaining weight, doing better, very optimistic. And I mean, I'm talking months, Callie. I mean, I went months where I was okay and still thinking things were going to get better because I was hoping this thing was going to get reversed. And so the denial part didn't happen until after I realized this thing was going to be permanent. And that's one thing I would say that I think all surgeons should be cognizant of. The whole conversation with this absolutely being a temporary thing, without a conversation that's ideally what we're looking for. That's our that's our, if things are going to go the best, that's where we want to end up. But the possibilities are so broad. And I was under the impression, like a whole lot of people that end up having permanent ostomies, that it was going to get reversed. And I'd say, people with Crohn's are probably more like this because the ostomy doesn't heal Crohn's like it does so much with colitis. Your symptoms and things come back and they stick around, and you're still got the autoimmunity of it, and it's, you still have all those problems along with now having an ostomy. And so you think that, you don't expect things to stay the same or get worse even after the ostomy. And so there's just such a possibility out there for things to be different. And I was expecting mine to be reversed, and it ended up not working out that way because the wound on my rear end wouldn't heal from all my from the fistula surgery, and it just wouldn't close. The hole in my colon wouldn't close, and it's still open today. And that's the reason I had to get the ostomy and had to keep it, was because it never went away. And now I have both. Now I still have problems down there, and I have an ostomy also, along with the other symptoms, though I'm not dying like I was before. And so it hit me probably at the 6-month mark, 7-month mark, where the wound on my backside it got to a point where it stopped. It just stopped healing. It stopped closing. It closed well for a while and did great, and then it just stopped, and it stayed. And then the conversations at my regular appointments with the doctor were not as optimistic, and it was more of this, you're just gonna have to get used to dealing with this. And that's when the denial started. That's when the denial and depression and the anger all came in all at once. I was angry just because I didn't like having to deal with my ostomy for that period of time, and there was messes and things, but my personality is such that I can adapt and get over it, and I was so used to pushing those emotions down anyways that it was just something else. But then it all accumulated by that 6 to 9 month range after my ostomy surgery, where I was like, this is gonna be for freaking ever. What? And I hated that fact. I hated being single. I hated thinking of dating. It was all bad in my mind. And I couldn't think of anything else. I'd go to my doctor, I'd go to my nurse, just probably like you have with your patients, and you could tell me anything and you couldn't get through to me. I turned on my ears when I needed them in the world, but I used everybody just to get myself to the next time I could be alone, because that's all I was looking for. I just wanted to be alone. I didn't want to have to deal with anybody. I didn't want to have to see anybody. I didn't want to have to pass gas. I didn't mind explaining to people that I had an ostomy and that gas or that noise was from that, knowing it was going to get reversed because I wasn't going to be like this forever. And then those people would, vanity is probably the reason, but those people would think I was awesome for being able to overcome this. And then it would be gone and I'd have a good story. Well, now I got a permanent story. And that broke
So you were
me.
almost kind of bargaining, where you were talking about the depression, the denial and the depression and all of that came later, but you were kind of bargaining in the beginning, saying, okay, I've got this light at the end of the tunnel. If I can get till, a lot of times, depending on the surgeon and the situation, how long of a time frame, whether it's 3, 6, 9 months, they may give you before it's reversed.
Yeah.
And you're kind of saying, okay, if I can get to 3 months, and then we're going to go through the reversal. If I can get to 6 months, and if I can get through this to the next step. And so everybody may not be in that, like you said, you were kind of bargaining before and then fell into that
Yeah.
depression and anger after you knew it was going to be permanent.
Yep, exactly. Well, I know that eventually, when I realized that this was going to be a permanent thing, all the gas was out of my tank by then. I mean, it was like I was going every day to get to this goal, and then that goal was no longer even a possibility. And it was just like hitting a brick wall. And I didn't care. And that's when I just started drinking and going out and running. I didn't care how bad I felt. I almost felt like I enjoyed the punishment of being sick, from doing all the staying out late, not sleeping, eating terribly, drinking like I was. I mean, I took all of that almost like, you know what, I deserve it. And I don't even care. I don't care how bad I feel physically, because emotionally, it was bad. And so it wasn't like I was punishing myself, but I was. I mean, I didn't want to change. I didn't want to listen to anybody. And that kept up for a while. And I still I'm a social person too, as you can tell.
What was kind of your, if you want to say, kind of turning point? I mean, I know your wife is a very important piece of your story as well.
Yeah.
But what do you feel like, I mean, was there a time that you were actually treated for depression, or, that there was something specific that you remembered that things kind of changed, or, for you, where you felt like, okay, take the bull by the horns, where those coping mechanisms changed and things in your life changed?
Well, it was over a period of time, because I started just having problems in a number of areas of my life. And so I got put on anxiety medicine almost as PTSD from all the surgeries, and then the ostomy, and then the traumatic event that was in the hospital where I almost died from all of that terrible infection I was dealing with. And so I was on anxiety medicine for that, and I was taking that for a while. And when you're taking that with all the pain meds I was on and all the other stuff, it over that period of time while I was working out and I was doing great, I still kept falling into this dark hole, and eventually got on depression medicine and stayed on that for a while. But I didn't like the way that it made me feel. I didn't like what it did to my head. I have no opinion either way. I personally, when I was taking it, I really didn't like the way that I felt like I was, I'm going to use the word zombie, like I just felt like I was kind of zombieing through my life. And I have a pretty outgoing personality, and it was almost like I was watching myself move through life, and I was like, that's not the same dude, and I don't like this. And
didn't like the feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to stop taking my depression medicine, I decided that if I wasn't going to do that, I needed to do something else. And so that's when I started talking to a number of people in my life that would be mentor types, and which then hooked me up with a good priest at our parish that I was going to at the time. And I just began kind of unloading and talking about a lot of the things that were on my mind, things that I was struggling with. I needed to voice it all. It had all just been buried. And it's funny about human nature, about how we can kind of bury something like it doesn't exist. Like there's an incredible invisible reality for all of us. Like just look at a handshake, right? You see two people shaking hands. That handshake, you just see an expression of a possible relationship, but you don't know if they're friends. You don't know, maybe if they hug, maybe if they do the handshake, pat on the back man hug thing, you know there's a little bit more there, but even then you don't know. There's an invisible reality that takes place, like the ring on my finger. And so when I began to just get this stuff, talk about it honestly and call things what they were, and this was, so as Catholics we have the sacrament of confession. This wasn't anything like that yet. I wasn't at that point. All I was doing, this was like a psychological examination where I was just stomping through with someone I trusted what was going on in my head, and they were helping me sort through it. And I would say once I began to be reminded, so I went to Catholic school my whole life. I have I'll call it a very well-formed conscience from a very young age. I know what's right and wrong. Some people can call it Catholic guilt. I have a well-formed conscience. I know what's right and wrong. I've always had a pretty good understanding of it. And when I got to the point where I really couldn't handle the life that I was living, I had to make some connections in regards to the way that I was living and the way that I was feeling. And until I sat down and began talking through this stuff and pulling them out and talking through them and putting them in the right place and realizing that none of that mattered for the reason I was here. The ultimate human question, the one that we're all asking is, who am I? Who am I? And once you answer that question, it leads to the next question, and that's, what's my purpose? And then that's a whole other long hole you can go run down. And then when you get to the end of that one, it's, where am I going? And so the deepest human questions I began to realize the answer to. I realized I was loved, that I was created out of love. I was given parents and a family that exampled this incredibly. And once I realized that I was loved, that I was lovable, even though I might not have liked myself, that's when I began to really just open up and be more optimistic about the fact that there might be a chance. Does that make sense? So it was kind of like, I don't like using the analogy of like a big spiritual conversion, because it wasn't like that. I'm a very reasonable person. I think through things. I'm a pessimist at heart. I'm always questioning everything, and I knew that who I was incredibly important, and what my purpose here was had nothing to do with my health and had everything to do with my health. But I was identifying myself with my health problems and not with who I was and why I was here. All I saw was a sick dude who caused everyone else problems, and I was constantly in pain, and it just sucked. And that was depressing. And until I was able to kind of start letting some of this stuff out and talking, I would have stayed there. But that would have been my turning point, was once I started digging all that up and talking through it with somebody that knew what to do with the information, that could help me sort through it, put it in its right place, and could kind of guide my thoughts in a way that was appropriate for me. I mean, like I said, I'm a pessimist, and I wasn't, at that point, I wasn't looking for just some stupid spiritual answer that God loves me, Jesus died for my sins. Great, wonderful, I get all that. That's a great story, I heard it 1,000 times. Why the hell do I feel the way that I do? And that's what I needed to answer, and that's what really needed to be weeded out. Was I needed to be able to know that it was okay to feel the way that I was feeling, and to say the things that I needed to say in the way that I said it. And that was, you couldn't replace that. That's why I love whenever somebody like starts doing that, and you get to see their passion, and they get to tell you exactly how they feel, not some sugar-coated, politically correct way of saying something, but really how you feel. And that's when I was able to solve the problem, when I was able to identify it.
I think a lot of people are so scared of feeling judged or feeling that they're not comfortable talking about those things. And that's so important. I mean, just support systems, depending on who that may be, whether it's your priest, your pastor, a counselor that doesn't know you from Adam, your parents, a spouse, even a child that may be of teenage age, or even in college, depending on the patient's age. It's so important to be able to feel like when you really want to say what you're thinking, you can.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, that's exactly where you're going to be, and it's bottled up and it stays there. And if it doesn't get out, it becomes toxic and can cause so many other problems, around you. And it makes such a difference when that support system is strong. And like you said, to tell yourself, okay, I am loved. I can move on. This is where, I need to be, to know that, at your point and where you were in your life at your age, talking about dating and, dealing with those situations and thinking, oh gosh, who's going to want to be with me? Are they going to want to date me? I have an ostomy. Why would they want to be with me? And those type of feelings that, that you're worthy of being loved and being with somebody that to start your life with, despite your medical issues too.
I didn't want to be with myself. Why would somebody want to be with me? And until I was able to be happy with myself, as cliche as that sounds, man, it was dead on.
It's so true. I mean, because, and even you see people, and where you were talking about the handshake. I am one of those people that I think the older I've gotten, the more that I pay attention to body language, to facial expressions, those type of things. And I think the longer that I've been dealing with ostomy patients, I've become much more sensitive with that too, because you can have two individuals, like you said, that nobody knows each other's story, but yet you can look at someone and you can sure think you know what's going on, but you have no idea what that person is dealing with. And just getting past, unfortunately, the human nature of, like I said, using the word judging or profiling or whatever it may be. I just know as women, we're very guilty of doing that more frequently than men are probably, but just a matter of be happy inside, because if you're doing that to somebody else and thinking about those situations, you're not happy inside, and you have to be able to deal with your own problems by being happy, like you said, with yourself, before you can try to make situations better in what you're dealing with, no matter what it is too.
Do you see the same struggling steps consistently with your patients, or is it just across the board? Because personalities are so different and everybody's kind of dealing with these issues at different points in their life, that some of them accept it early on and just rock out, and then others really struggle.
I'll be honest with you, I feel like I have a pretty wide range of ages, patient base of around 80 to 100 right now, depending on, when I'm seeing them, whatnot, if you will, but ages consistently from about 30 to 90 right now. And I will tell you that my 85-year-old women rock it. And I can't say that's across the board, every single one of them, but they can adapt to a new ostomy like that. It floors me. And I don't know if that's an age-related thing, but it is a matter of, I think, because they're not, in that matter of, they're not single, they're not dating. They may be widowed, they may still have a spouse that's living, but they've kind of gotten through those hard points in their life, if you will. But I feel like they are to that acceptance point much quicker than obviously my young individuals, even if they are married or have children or have a very strong support system, whatever it may be. I do feel like my 40-year-old men are the ones that struggle the most, even if they are in a very secure relationship or marriage, if you will. And I think that's kind of what I see. To answer that question more directly, a matter of, I feel like everybody deals with the same situations, but the degree is much less in regards to sex as well as age.
Yeah. Well, if I didn't have to deal with this when I was 22 years old and my hormones were stronger than my loneliness,
Right.
then I would have never overcome it. I mean, it beat the crap out of me. It really, really did. And I began, like, I always saw relationships like having all my health problems and having to have a relationship with somebody where you're seeing them regularly. I mean, I had to disclose my health issues to them early on. And I felt like every relationship was, and this goes, you don't even have to have health problems for this to happen. This happens all the time, was more of an exchange of information. And so you meet somebody, you're dating them, and I'm slowly letting them into my world. I'm slowly giving them information about myself, hoping that they still keep sticking around, and that in the meantime I still like them. And I just disclose all my intimate truths, all the things about me that I don't really tell anybody else, and letting people into that world. And then when I had an ostomy, and letting them into that personal, intimate, incredibly insecure side of myself, and then having to deal with the relationship crap that comes from it, where I mean, I wasn't looking for like healthy relationships. I'm always been a mama's boy. I've always needed someone to take care of me. I've always wanted a very loving woman in my life. And even in doing that, I was dating in relationships with girls in unhealthy relationships, whether they were physically active or whether they were just emotionally exhausting because of my neediness, whether it was the need for attention or the constant need for feedback or whatever it may be. And that regular having to disclose all this stuff to someone and then deal with the relationship and break up and then have to start all over with someone else was like, oh my gosh. And then there's one person out the door that now has that, and they can do with it whatever they want. And you usually don't leave relationships trusting somebody. And then they have this piece of you, and they're out there in the world. And it's just kind of like, oh my goodness. Over and over again, I just felt like I was just getting peeled, like skin was just getting peeled off of me. And it was just more and more pain from having to deal with that after having that surgery. I absolutely hated dating. And I had to basically commit to non-physical relationships. I had to be in complete control and just be totally standoff in regards to all of that, and try and, get to know somebody, Callie.
Yeah. Well, and just disclosing that information as you go to dinner and your stoma is active and expelling gas, and it could be within 20 minutes, that you're having to divulge that information that is very sensitive and that you're not comfortable doing, but you're forced to do because of the situation. And at 22, oh my gosh, I just think, I didn't get married till I was 29 because there was no way in heck I was going to slow down at that age. I wasn't ready for kids. We were, you're in your college days, you're having a blast. And like you said, as a male, hormonally and, the things that you're wanting to do with friends, and, you feel like you're on top of the world at that age in a normal situation. And so that is a very tough time to be going through the things that you were going through, most definitely.
I'd be sitting at dinner, waiting for us to order, and then by the time she would order her food, and there's foods I can't eat, and like the way my stomach works, and it's always kind of been this way, is you could list off 20 things that you're thinking about having for dinner, and I will tell you as you say them whether or not they're going to work that day, because I can kind of picture and visualize myself eating them and how my stomach's going to react to them. And so I could be at dinner and we'd just be getting to know each other, sitting down, and the waiter or waitress would come over and ask for our order, and I usually wouldn't get an appetizer just because most of it's fried, most of it's fun, exciting flavors, and I don't play that game anymore. And so the person I'd be on a date with would order something that had onions in it, or something that would just set my system off. And I'm serious. It would start, my system would start acting up just thinking about having that dish set right in front of me and having to think about eating it. And so my bride made my day when we went to eat dinner, and I ordered my meal, chicken quesadillas with no onions, and my beloved said she wanted chicken quesadillas with no onions too. And I was like, holy crap, who are you? I love you.
It's meant to be.
This is amazing. Step one is a good step, but I'm serious. Like we both we've gone back to that throughout our relationship so many times, because that really, in my mind, I was just like, oh my gosh, someone who doesn't like onions just like me. And then I needed to find out how much she didn't like onions. She's like,
awesome.
She doesn't have it in anything. I'm like, oh, you're amazing.
Perfect.
And so now, like, even in regards to onions, but like with my daughters, so we watch the Food Channel all the time. And when they're cooking stuff, and whenever Ree Drummond throws some onions in anything she's fixing, my daughters, because they've heard me say it, every one of them, they'll go, onions? Ew, Dad, she's putting onions in the meal, ruining the meal. And I'm like, I know.
That is so funny.
Why even waste your time fixing it? And then they'll come back with something else, but it's so funny. I hate onions. I've taught my kids to hate them. Eventually, maybe they'll realize it was indoctrination, and they might love them. But
you can try them when you're out of the house, right? Don't bring them to home. When you're.
That's right. Well,
that's awesome.
Well, either way, I want to kind of end this on the point of the acceptance side of it, in regards to like me, since that's what we were talking about. And it didn't happen right away by any means, but the acceptance is something that I literally still do today, Callie. It is an ongoing thing. There are days I wake up and I am mad as hell that I still have this ostomy. You go to sleep and you have a gassy night, and that thing blows off and gets crap all over you in the bed with your spouse or your beloved animal, or whoever stays in your, it is embarrassing even when you're alone. And I have to go through those steps over and over again in little ways. It's not as big as it was before, but in little ways. And sometimes I need help out of it. And I communicate and talk with a lot of people about this stuff. I have a lot of really good people in my life, but there was a time when I didn't. But it is something that still happens. It's like conversion. It's something you got to wake up every single day and choose to do. You wake up and you choose to love, and you wake up and you choose to accept this reality of having an ostomy, having health issues, whatever it may be. But I kind of want to, I'd like to kind of iterate that, because it's not something that goes away. It's some people it does, and it's hard sometimes to see, like if you're watching social media, and depending on who you see, that everything's always going great for them. But this is something that you regularly have and it's fine if you hate having it for a day. Again, it happens, and you don't have to like it. But it's like a lot of other things in your life that are unchanging. We have to learn and grow to accept it. And so that's a huge, huge deal. And humor really flipping helps. And when you got gas problems,
it does.
being able to see humor in that, it really, really helps. So, Callie, this was awesome. I'm really glad we did it again. And you can now get back to your busy life and let all your patients and everyone at the clinic there grab you by 100 different directions and pull you, because I will release you. And I appreciate you taking the time as you usually do, and you're super sweet, and this is going to hopefully help a lot of people. So thanks, Callie.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Austin. Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, it's your host, the Ostomy Guy. We've been listening to everybody else's story and I've been kind of hiding from it. But the time is here. My story's out. The Ostomy Guy story, Memoirs of a Bagman. Finally published and ready to buy. www.amazon.com. Go buy one for yourself and one for a loved one. You won't regret it.